everybody, and welcome back to the Law Unscripted. Today we are doing video lecture number 2 for constitutional law. We're going to talk about individual freedoms, including due process, equal protection, and the freedoms involved in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech. This is probably the largest one. There's so much case law. There's a lot for both religion and free speech. But this is where we get into a lot of nuances. We're getting into strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and rational basis. And the way that I've divided it is I've sectioned it into strict scrutiny cases, intermediate scrutiny, and minimal scrutiny. So we're going to talk about each, and then those that are just prohibited. So, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. This is considered freedom of expression, freedom of speech, the right to communicate and how people communicate, how they express themselves through speech or through conduct that's meant to have a message, a communication of some kind of idea, thought, plan. It's written and visual communications, and in general, state actors in general can regulate time, place, and manner of speech. But we're going to get more into that. So which ones are subject to strict scrutiny? If they are content-based laws, we're going to put them into strict scrutiny. This is just like the religion. If they are specifically naming a religion or a type of religious practice, strict scrutiny. Same with speech. If they are specifically facially in the law, basing it on content of speech, it is strict scrutiny. These are still presumptively invalid. The law has to be necessary, serve a compelling government interest, be narrowly tailored to the least restrictive means of achieving that governmental interest. Some compelling interests are defined of shocking, police powers, general health, welfare, and safety, and the protection of fundamental rights. So if we're looking at the protection of other fundamental rights, like the right to vote, then we're going to be looking at strict scrutiny. They have to be narrowly tailored. Again, they can't be overly broad or overly inclusive or under-inclusive. If they are content-based in application or in intent, they're also subject to strict scrutiny. So if the intent is there, it's going to bump it up to that highest level. Political speech is also a category for strict scrutiny review. This is unrestricted discussion of government affairs, including speech about political entities, governments, institutions, elections, and candidates. In 2023, we're dealing with this a lot for Donald Trump and his various trials. What does it mean to have speech that's politically based as to he's running as a candidate for the office? So what is protected under strict scrutiny for what he is saying about the government, about the DA's offices, the prosecutors, the attorney general's offices, other witnesses? What part of that speech, if any, can be abridged, can be taken away from Donald Trump, subject to strict scrutiny? These include, so in some of the gag orders, they have been restricting his speech about witnesses, but not about the prosecutors. So if it's against a governmental action, the gag orders this year have seemed to indicate that he can still talk about Jack Smith. He can still talk about President Biden. He can still talk about what he will do instead. But if it's a target specifically related to the trial in the case, then generally the courts, at least in 2023, have not been protecting that. They have been issuing those gag orders. Political expenditures are subject to strict scrutiny. These are laws limiting payments by individuals and corporations for communications related to political candidates' election campaigns. These expenditures are not the same thing as campaign contributions to individual candidates and parties. That's intermediate scrutiny. In general, there should be no limit on the types of payments for political communications. These are when you're putting ads on TV in favor of your political candidate, something like that, passing out flyers. But the payments for such communications, for putting on the advertisements, et cetera, they have to be declared and disclosed. An individual candidate cannot be limited in their own spending for their own campaign activities. Strict scrutiny also applies to this freedom not to speak. Individuals have that freedom. They